Hey guys, Billzoid here, and so I managed to validate over DDR4-6000. In fact, I managed to do DDR4-6020, so the actual physical clock was at 3010 megahertz, um, which, yeah, that's pretty neat. Anyway, the system pictures here aren't from the actual session. This is from, the indoor setup that I was running. Um, Anyway, this puts me at 15th in the world for memory frequency, so that's pretty neat. What's also kind of neat is I'm one of the 17 people to ever. Actually, I don't think it's even 17 people because this guy's twice. So there's like 16 people who have gone over DDR4 6000. And I think I'm the only one to not use LN2 for it. Like, as in everything was technically air cooled. And you might be like, wait, but isn't that stock? Well, I mean, yeah, very stock. Um, so the thing is, it's like that's not really a big deal. That's like if I could use LN2, I would have used LN2. It would have made the whole process much easier and far less unpleasant. Because yeah, the way I got this was that I went out at 4 in the morning. Actually, I went out at like 3:30 in the morning or something like that. Um, yeah, so late at night, I went out and I spent an hour trying to get the memory frequency score because I was having like it was super. The system got super weird when I went outside. Like, I don't know if it's because of the low temperatures or if it happened as I was moving the motherboard from my desk to the small table that I carried outside. Um, but basically I lost all of my profiles. And then the whole system was just kind of being very, very strange. And it was really cold. So right there, you can see my setup over in this area. That's, you can see the lamp. Oh, why doesn't the select thing work? So, yeah, we have the lamp, right? You can kind of make out the monitor over there. Anyway, so yeah, that's where I was. And this is a car in the parking lot behind the building that I live in. And yeah, that's frost. So it was well below zero. Um, so which was what I was going for. The thing is, I wasn't expecting to be outside for an hour, right? So it was pretty like I didn't have gloves. Well, I don't think I even have gloves here, because again, it's like I did like I you, the UK doesn't get that cold, and normally you can just stand around with your hands in your pockets, right? So, um, yeah, the issue is, of course, if you're overclocking, you need to, use the mouse and the keyboard and hit the reset button because the bloody F9 codes. And yeah, so after about an hour, my hands were absolutely freezing, so that was fun. Um, anyway, so here's a close up of the actual setup, of course, blue screened. CPU temperature at this moment was 19 degrees, so yeah, I'm just on the air cooler. I had to take the fan off of the. You'll notice there's no fan over the memory stick. And that's actually interesting because I was having so many weird issues. So, of course, the profiles were gone, which was just like, well, that kind of sucked. But honestly, I was having issues just doing like even 5800 initially. And what was super strange is it basically like I could go up to some frequency, and then once I'd get around to like maxing out the fan speed, suddenly it would stop training. And so it turns out that my suspicion that I've had for a very long time was actually correct. Resting a fan on your memory stick is bad for maximum stable memory frequency. But I'm not sure, and I think it's almost entirely because of the vibrations from the fan just transferring to the memory stick, and so the memory stick vibrates in the DIMM slot, and then that screws up the pin contact. You can't get you can't train. So that was yeah. So here at this point, I figured that out. So there's no fan on the memory stick at that point, but I did notice that the memory stick was kind of warm, right? Like I wanted it to be as close to air temperature as possible. I almost said room temperature, but it's outside, right? It's not inside a room. Um, so that doesn't really work. But anyway, so yeah, CPU is nice and cold. Fun fact, heat pipes actually have a minimum, like, well, there's a lower minimum temperature at which, like, below which they basically don't work because they rely on a phase change cycle, and if the heat pipe's too cold, it stops working properly. So Yeah, but it's fine. Like, we're not worried about the CPU. And actually, that's another thing that was kind of weird. I ended up having to run like 1.35 volts vCore, and I'm not sure if that was like, again, I only spent an hour outside. Like, I really didn't want to be out there very long, partially because I didn't want to annoy the neighbors, which I accidentally ended up doing anyway. Well, I don't think I annoyed them, but they did get one of my neighbors got very suspicious of what I was doing. So, anyway, um, yeah, next time I do something like this, I want to do it in like my own backyard instead of, in a shared parking lot that's behind the building that I live in. Because yeah, also the mechanical keyboard probably wasn't helping. Because I like cherry, like that's a knockoff Cherry Blues on that keyboard. So yeah, it's very clicky. Um, Anyway, also I brought out a light because I couldn't see anything. So that, yeah, I wasn't being very particularly stealthy with the whole operation. So, um, because I really didn't think I'd have to be there an hour. So, but because I was there only for an hour, I have no idea if the 1.35 volt CPU voltage that I ended up running was necessary, but I was having so many strange problems that it was just like, because like I'd set 1.1 volt CPU voltage, I'd set 3 gigahertz, I'd enable XMP, and which would work. Then I'd go up to 5500, which should work just fine. I didn't try saving any profiles, which I probably should have tried to see if like maybe the chip that the profiles are being saved to was getting wiped by the low temperatures, which isn't impossible. That can happen. I was actually really worried that the SSD would stop working because SSDs, if they get cold enough, they just die. Which admittedly this is 0 degrees, so the SSD really shouldn't have a problem with that. It's not that, like, this is slightly below 0, so it really shouldn't have had a problem with that. But it was still one of those things like, is a cheap SSD. Um, they're not really designed to work at low temperatures, but admittedly, it wasn't like minus 50. I've heard from people that like sometimes SSDs, if you have them in like cold boxes or something, that they just stop completely functioning. Um, that's one of the main reasons why you don't see like full liquid nitrogen immersions is like, yeah, your CPU and memory might be fine. Everything else in the system will probably glitch out below minus. Like most stuff is only rated down to like minus, well, it depends on which grade of parts you're looking at, but like consumer grade normally is rated to like 0 degrees, depending on what it is, or minus 50. And then like even industrial stuff is just rated down to minus 50. Because normally what industrial cares more about is having a higher max temperature, not lower minimum temperature. So, um, anyway, so yeah, the board was being a little bit weird, and I ended up running a ton of CPU voltage, and also the fan was screwing up memory training. Anyway, here we are in the system. So this, I didn't think this actually managed to save, but it did. As you can see that, I have the validation on HWBot. But yeah, no, this, I didn't think this would actually validate, like save, because the problem I was running into with this was, oh yeah, and you can see CPU temperature at 16 degrees. I really wish, well, I was considering bringing a thermometer with me, but the thing is, like, look at that desk. There's no space. I didn't really want to haul any more stuff than was absolutely necessary. And while I know a lot of people, like to look at their dim temperatures and go like, oh, is it running too hot? Is it running too cold? I have a much simpler method for figuring out if the memory stick is too hot or too cold. Is the frequency higher? If it's not, it's too warm. So if it's more stable, it's at the right temperature. So anyway, so I thought this locked up because basically at 107.5 VCLK, like the mouse would like move around for a bit, but when I actually went to like start making the screenshots, like the system just immediately started dying. So yeah, I didn't think this made it through, but it did, which is pretty neat. So I did manage to save that. And I think I actually got this pretty quickly. Like, I think I got this in like 30 minutes, and then I spent the next 30 minutes trying to go past this and never got anywhere. So that's great. Memory overclocking 101. Anyway, here's some fun stuff because, well, just for fun, because the thing is, it's one thing to get into Windows and then raise the BCLK. It's another thing to actually get the motherboard to go through the entire training process, right? So I wanted to see, because normally like I would train at like 5850, and then I would walk the BCLK up in the operating system. But so I was wondering like, hey, how close to the validation frequency was the system able to train? Oh yeah, and CPU's at 13, motherboard's at 8, the memory stick, and I think at this point I figured out how to get the fan on the memory stick. Indeed I did. So yeah, you can see the fan is back, because now the fan, instead of like resting on top of the memory stick, it's actually hooked on this standoff right here. So it's actually hovering above the memory stick, and so the vibrations from the fan going at full speed don't transfer to the memory stick, which means I can still train. But as you can see right here, we have an F9 code, so yeah, mashing the reset button. Um, I don't know, like I don't normally have to work with photos, and also yeah, this is horribly blurry because I was cold. I was trying to reset the system, and I was like, oh, this is just take a random picture. Maybe I'll figure out something to say about it. So anyway, I did figure out how to get the fan back on eventually. I don't know that it helped much, because yeah, like I don't remember. Like again, I only spent an hour on it. I didn't have a lot of time to test everything I wanted to test. It was just kind of like quickly get a screenshot and just go back in because it's cold. Neighbors are getting suspicious. um, yeah, you know. So anyway, yeah, and then we have this trained. So this was this is the point where I sort of came to the conclusion that I'm just not getting a higher frequency in Windows. So I kept trying to like fiddle, like I kept trying like looser timings and different termination setting. Like, oh no, not termination. I tried different drive strengths, more voltage, less voltage, more VTT DDR, less VTT DDR, more SOC voltage, less SOC voltage. Nothing was doing bloody anything because I had like I nailed the settings like right from the start because I already, I've worked with these DIMMs enough, and the temperature, like going from room temperature to around zero air temperature, um, well, going from like 20 degrees ambient to 0 degrees ambient didn't really make that much of a difference in terms of the voltage tolerance on the memory sticks. So yeah, like the settings that worked at 20 degrees, surprise, surprise, still work just fine at like -1 or something. Um, anyway, it was able to train 6 gig just straight into the BIOS, which was pretty neat. Um, but yeah, like unfortunately, as needed, like I could train this, but I wouldn't get into Windows with that. And even if I went into Windows, I couldn't actually go higher frequency than this, which is like that's just been a general trend with these memory sticks. Is like I can train them within like I can train and get into Windows within like 30 megahertz of the highest run of like highest frequency I can screenshot. So probably if I tried to get in at like 5970 or 5960, I would have made it in, and then I would have still only been able to validate 6010. So yeah, anyway, and I think that's it. Oh, and then here's one last shot of the setup once I figured out how to get the fan on. CPU is at 11 degrees at this point, so the CPU was like, yeah, so the CPU was getting a little bit colder, and then of course blue screens, because blue screens are what you like. I think this was me trying to get into Windows with the memory at 6,000. So yeah, no, Windows didn't like that. Um, and yeah, and then here's one of the only screenshots I took from the entire session. Not that you can really see anything in it, because I didn't like. I was like, oh my god, I'm so close to 6,000. Let's take a screenshot, and then I actually got 6,000. Right, like I got the 3010. Didn't screenshot that because it was just like validate, validate, validate. I have to get that bloody validation. Screenshots be damned, we need that validation file. Way more important. So I did get that validation file. So yeah, anyway, that's it. So that was the what would that be? 4 a.m. Cold air memory bench session. So yeah, if you just live in a really cold place, you can replicate this um, with these 5100 ballistic sticks. Um, yeah, not pleasant. Next time I need to bring gloves. Well, more like if I want to do this again for like longer, I need to bring gloves. The thing is, like the UK doesn't really get that cold. Like, honestly, I'm kind of lucky that it went below 0 at all. Because, like, any other day of the week, like, for the next several days or something, it's going to be above 0 in my area. So, Yeah. Which I don't know that it was necessary to be, going sub-zero for the ambient air temperature, but it was just kind of like I'll take any amount of cold I can get at this point. Right? Because these obviously scale a little bit, like they scale with temperature, so it's just like I want them as cold as possible. And if that means going out at 4 a.m., which admittedly isn't actually like the most optimal time for the lowest possible temperature, like ideally you'd want to go out right before the like right around the time the like at like an hour before the sun comes up or something like that. But the thing is, I really didn't want to deal with like neighbors, coming and going around my setup, so and having to explain what I'm doing. So, yeah. Anyway, but it was kind of like now I feel like I actually deserve this score because now I actually like suffered for it. It was actually kind of difficult because now because here's the thing, like normally it's just like the 5900 stuff, like that was all just kind of like you can do that on like room temperature in a it doesn't take really any effort. um but this was like, because the thing is the profiles were gone, the system was being a kind of weird, which incidentally, if somebody's like, oh, the system was being weird, you had condensation. It doesn't work like that. Condensation is a problem that you have if you take a cold object into a warm environment. It doesn't work the other way around. You can take a warm object and take it outside, like into a cold environment, and it'll be just fine. Because condensation is that you pull, like, the air around the cold object gets cooled down, and then the water that's in the air can no longer, like, the air can't carry as much humidity anymore, so the water that's in the air ends up condensing on the surfaces of the cold object. But yeah, that doesn't work if you have a warm object in a cold environment. So that wasn't it. Like if it was being weird, like all the weirdness I would just attribute to the temperature itself, which it really shouldn't be doing that at 0 degrees, but I don't know, maybe like again, I didn't have time to test. It was just like I want to get like it was really freaking cold. So if I wasn't so, cuz like the thing is, if you're at like minus 50 degrees, stuff behaving weirdly, okay. 0 degrees though, it's like an air cooling. Like nothing should be misbehaving at that temperature. Like that is way too warm to be having like serious cold issues. But nah, profile's gone. Which also the thing with the memory stick being sensitive to the vibrations from the fan, that wasn't a thing indoors. Maybe the fan wasn't rattling around as much because it was better secured when I had it indoors, but yeah, like I don't remember the fan being an issue when I was indoors, and then it was an issue when I was outside. So I'm not sure what's up with that. I can't test if it was definitely that, like, because now it's like, oh, now you need to test in room temperature anyway. So I'll stop boring you with like the weird anomalies that I didn't get to test. But yeah, this was interesting. I'd love to do this more, except I don't want to do it in a location like this, right? That sucked. Like, I'd love to do this kind of thing more because it's just like it's free cooling. Like, especially with something like a quad GPU setup, this would be freaking awesome. Because you can drop like, yeah, with a quad GPU setup, this is perfect. Um, Now some people might be like, why don't you just like put a radiator in a window? Well, if you put your radiator in a window and the radiator is pulling in 0 degree air, and the water in the loop is approaching 0 degrees, and the system is inside a room that's well above 0 degrees, well, you get the condensation hazard again. So, yeah, so the funny thing is, if you take your whole system outside, no condensation hazard, but if you're in the UK, you've got the whole, it might start raining at any moment, and your system's dead. Um, but, yeah, like, from a condensation perspective, this is actually way better than like any kind of chilling system. Like if you just take a system outside, other than the consideration that, well, actually no, if you're on AIOs, if you use AIOs, because again, air coolers get weird if you get them too cold. Um, but if you have an AIO, you can take your AIO and like because AIOs don't like as long as the AIO, which I think most AIOs have the glycol mix in them set up for like -10 to -20. Um, So basically, if it was like -5 degrees outside, you could take your AIO cooled system with your water cooled like AIO cooled GPUs, or if you're on water cooling, you could just add some antifreeze. Well, yeah, and add antifreeze. I'm not saying you should run antifreeze every day, but a lot of parts, in my experience, are perfectly fine with antifreeze. So yeah, you could just add a bit of antifreeze to your cooling liquid, and then take it outside, and you can bench. Or I guess just don't leave the system turned off for long enough for like the water to freeze up. Because if the water freezes up, it's gonna start breaking stuff. Um, but yeah. So this is kind of fun. Um, and then of course, if it's above ambient, like if it's above 0, then you don't have to worry about any kind of cold issues with water cooling. You can just take the whole system outside, no condensate. Like again, the main concern is like, what if it starts raining? Um, so yeah. Anyway, so this was kind of fun. And also really, like, actually, it was kind of, like I said, looking back, fun. At the time, miserable because I was freezing cold. Also, I didn't have a chair, so I was just awkwardly, like, squatting down next to the system. Because, again, I really thought I would be there for, like, 15 minutes, not an hour. Anyway, I should end this video. This is way too long for considering how little useful information there is. So yeah, I did DDR4-6000. I hope to improve upon this score in the future, because obviously, like the next step, I need to get the sticks even colder. I was toying with the idea of just burying them in dry ice, but after the experience with they didn't speed up that much, and I think I might have been maxing out the CPU's memory controller. So. Though I guess I could dry ice the memory sticks and the CPU, and then the memory controller might improve. Maybe. I'm not sure. So, yeah. Anyway, this was that. So big thank you to Crucial for sending over the DDR4 5100 Ballistics Max kit, because yeah, these sticks make this kind of thing they make it easy. Right? Like, I don't think there's much RAM out there that you could do this kind of thing. Even considering that I was at around 0 to -2 degrees -2 degrees Celsius ambient temperature, like, yeah, there's not a lot of memory that'll do this kind of frequency just in general. It's just not really a thing. And what else did I want to point? Oh yeah, and thank you to MSI for the B550 Unify X, because it's I'm not gonna say it's definitely the best memory overclocking motherboard I've ever used, but it's the least obnoxious one to work with. At least up until it forgot all of my profiles when I took it outside, and I was like, oh no. So yeah, that's super strange. I still don't know why it did that. But like, the main thing is having the ability to just mash reset to get through the F9 codes, because on some other a lot of other motherboards, you can't do that. If you keep trying to just reset through an F9 code, the motherboard will eventually trigger the auto recovery, and it'll throw you back into the BIOS, and it's like no. We need to retrain. Yes, again. Like, so yeah, that's kind of the thing. Anyway, so yeah, thank you to Crucial and MSI for the hardware, and big thank you to the patrons, because without without the patrons, I wouldn't have the 4750G, which is very much necessary for doing this. The other, like, regular Ryzen's, well, basically there's no other CPU that's viable for doing this on air cooling. So yeah, and that's it for the video. So thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. And if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I do have a Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the AHOC Teespring store, where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, the usual YouTuber merch. There's a link to that down in the description below as well. And yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.